Zena stood outside the house she once called home, now holding the title deed in her own name, a house her parents sold her inheritance to protect, just to make her brother look important in front of his friends. As her father banged on the new lock and her mother cried behind him, she said softly, "I begged you to see me. Now you'll have to watch me from the outside." Zena was the kind of daughter who never demanded anything. She stayed quiet, helped around the house, and always waited her turn. But in her home, being quiet meant being forgotten. Her younger brother, Obisi, was treated like a prince. He always had new clothes, the latest toys, and all the love and attention. Zena, on the other hand, wore old clothes that had already been used, and every time she asked for something, the answer was always, maybe next time. It wasn't fair, but she got used to it. She told herself to be strong and keep going. When their grandfather died, the family gathered to read his final wishes. That day, Zena felt a small spark of hope. Her grandfather had always believed in her and wanted her to get an education. So, he left her a small piece of land, something she could use to build a future, maybe pay for school or start something of her own. For once, Zena felt seen, valued. She held on to that promise like it was gold. But a few months later, everything changed. She got a call from her mother, who sounded casual, like it wasn't a big deal. "We sold the land," she said. "Your brother needed a car for his new job." Just like that, the only thing Zena had ever been given was taken from her. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because someone else was always more important. They didn't even ask her. They just sold it and used the money, acting like she wouldn't mind, like she'd understand. After all, she was the strong one. That night, Zena walked for hours to get home from school. She didn't cry because of the land. She cried because no matter how hard she tried, no one in her own family ever truly saw her. In their eyes, she was just the girl in the background, useful, quiet, forgettable. And in that moment, something inside her started to shift. Not anger, not hate, just a silent promise to herself. One day, they would notice her, not because she begged for it, but because she built a life they could no longer ignore. About a month before Zena was supposed to pay her university fees, she got a phone call that changed everything. It was her mother. Her voice was calm, like she wasn't about to break Zena's heart. "We sold the land," she said. "Your brother needed a car for his new job." Just like that. No warning, no asking, no explanation. The land her grandfather had left for her future, for her education, was gone. The money that was meant to support her dreams used to buy a car for someone else, her brother. Again, Zena couldn't speak. Her throat felt tight, like all the words she wanted to scream were stuck. Her mind went blank. She tried to stay calm, but inside, it felt like something had cracked. She had trusted her family. She had believed that maybe, just maybe, she finally had something of her own. But now it was gone, and all her mother could say was, "You're strong, Zena. You'll figure it out." That night, Zena didn't have enough money for transport. She walked 4 hours all the way back from campus to the small room she rented. The streets were quiet. Her feet hurt. Her body was tired. But it was her heart that felt the heaviest. She didn't cry because of the land. She cried because her family didn't think twice before taking it from her. They didn't ask how she was doing in school. They didn't wonder if she had enough food, enough books, enough rest. They just assumed she would manage. Like always, as she walked under the streetlights, tears rolled down her face. But they weren't loud tears. They were the kind that come when you're completely alone, when you realize that the people you thought would protect you were the ones holding the knife. Zena had always done the right thing. She stayed out of trouble, worked hard, and stayed quiet. But somehow, none of that ever mattered. In her family's eyes, her brother was always the one who needed help, and she was the one expected to sacrifice. She reached her room and sat on the floor. No words, just silence. She stared at the wall and thought about everything, her dreams, her future, and how close she was to giving up. But even in that quiet pain, something was building inside her. Not hate, not revenge, just a quiet decision. If no one was going to fight for her, she would fight for herself. If they didn't see her now, one day they would. Not because she asked for attention, but because she would become someone too powerful to ignore. Zena couldn't afford her university fees anymore, so she quietly dropped out. No one in her family asked why she stopped going to class. No one even noticed. She packed her things and moved to the city, not with dreams in her eyes, but with survival on her mind. There were no soft beds or warm welcomes waiting for her, just a small room and a job as a cleaner. It wasn't easy, but she didn't complain. She woke up early, cleaned offices and shops, and saved every single coin she could. Every time she got paid, she kept a little for food and put the rest away. Not for shopping, not for fun, but for the future she still hoped for. She tried calling home sometimes, just to hear a familiar voice, or maybe feel less alone. But her calls were often ignored. When someone did pick up, the conversation was short and cold. It was clear they had moved on. Her brother Obisi was now the star of the family. Everyone talked about him, checked on him, and praised him. Zina, forgotten, as if she was never part of the picture. Then one day, while scrolling through her old phone, she saw something that made her heart freeze. It was a photo her brother had posted online. He stood next to a shiny new car, smiling wide like he had just won a lottery. The caption read, "A king deserves a chariot." Underneath, their father had commented proudly, "Proud of you, son." Dozens of likes, hearts, and cheering emojis followed. It was all celebration, all joy. Zina stared at the screen, her hands shaking. The car they bought with her inheritance, the land that was meant for her education, now stood there, shining like a trophy, for someone who had done nothing to earn it. No one mentioned her, no one thanked her. It was as if she didn't exist. The pain wasn't about the car. It wasn't even about the money. It was about being invisible, about watching her own sacrifice turn into someone else's success story, while she scrubbed floors in silence. She closed the phone, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. Sometimes, family isn't the people who love you. Sometimes they're just the ones who take your time, your dreams, your peace, without even a thank you. Zina realized she had become a bill her family didn't want to pay, but she also realized something else. She didn't need them to see her anymore. She just needed to see herself, clearly, fully, and with enough belief to start building a life on her own terms. Zina's life became very simple after everything fell apart. She found a small room to live in, just one room behind a noisy mechanic's shop. It wasn't much. The walls were thin, and the nights were loud with the sound of tools and engines, but it was hers, and that was enough. She didn't have a bed at first, just a mat on the floor, but she told herself every day, this is not the end, this is the beginning. During the day, she worked long hours cleaning. She swept floors, washed windows, and sometimes even helped the mechanic's wife carry goods to the market. But in the quiet moments, the ones no one saw, Zina was learning. She picked up old finance books from second-hand stalls and read them during her lunch breaks. Some pages were torn, some were stained, but to her, those books were gold. She didn't fully understand everything at first, but she kept going. Bit by bit, word by word, she started learning how money worked, how businesses grew, and how people built wealth from nothing. One evening, something special happened. The mechanic's son had thrown away an old broken laptop. Zina asked if she could take it. He laughed and said, "Sure, it's useless." But to her, it was a treasure. She took it to a repair shop, paid a small fee to get it working again, and began teaching herself how to code. It was hard. The screen would freeze, the battery didn't last long, and she often had to borrow Wi-Fi from a neighbor. But Zina was determined. She watched free tutorials online, practiced day and night, and slowly became better. 3 years passed like that, quietly, steadily. And then, one day, it happened. She got a remote job with a tech company based in South Africa. Her skills had finally paid off. When the first paycheck hit her account, she didn't scream or dance. She just smiled, a deep, peaceful smile. She stood in the middle of her little room, looked around and whispered to herself, "They thought I would beg, but I billed." In that moment, Zina knew something had changed. Not just her income or her job, but her entire future. She wasn't the forgotten girl anymore. She was now the woman shaping her own life, brick by brick, choice by choice. Rock bottom didn't break her. It became the door she walked through to reach her strength. And from that day on, she promised herself she would never be silent again. She would rise, and this time everyone would see. One afternoon, while buying tomatoes at a local market, Zina heard a voice she hadn't heard in a long time, her mother's. She was standing at a nearby stall, speaking to a woman and sounding very worried. Zina didn't move, but she listened closely. Her mother was saying that their house was in trouble. The bank had been sending letters. The mortgage hadn't been paid for months. They were behind on everything: bills, school fees for Obisi's children, even food. The The family that once acted like they had everything was now struggling, quietly and secretly. Zina didn't walk over. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, holding her small bag of vegetables, and listened as her mother's voice faded into the noise of the market. She went back to her room that day and sat down with her old laptop. She opened a search window and typed in the house address. It didn't take long to find the truth. The house was listed for bank auction in just a few weeks. It was real. They were losing the house. The same house where she had been treated like a burden. The same house where she was never truly seen. But instead of feeling joy or revenge, Zina felt quiet, calm. She knew what she had to do. She reached out to a lawyer she had once helped with a tech issue. She explained the situation and asked if he could help her buy the house without using her full name publicly. The lawyer agreed. Step by step, they followed the legal process. Zina didn't rush. She didn't tell anyone. She just did the work. And when the auction day came, her lawyer made the winning bid. No one at the auction knew who the buyer really was. The bank signed the papers, and just like that, the house had a new owner. The title was changed. The papers were clear. Only one name was on them now, Zina M. She sat quietly when she got the final confirmation. There was no cheering, no party, just her, alone in her small room, holding the official documents. She looked at the name on the paper and felt something deep in her chest. Not pride, but power. Not loud, but solid. She had bought the very place where she had once been made to feel like nothing. Now it belonged to her. And the best part? They didn't even know yet. Zina had stayed silent for years. But this silence, this one spoke louder than anything she could have ever said. 2 weeks after buying the house, Zina made a quiet phone call. She didn't write a letter. She didn't call her parents. She simply hired a team, a truck, some workers, and a property manager. Early one morning, that truck drove straight to the house. It carried paint cans, new locks, and boxes filled with smart security devices. The workers got to work right away. They started repainting the walls, changing the locks, and installing cameras. At first, Zina's parents were confused. They thought it was some mistake. Her father came outside, demanding to know what was going on. Her mother stood behind him, watching with fear in her eyes. The man in charge didn't argue. He simply pulled out a folder, opened it, and handed them an official paper, the deed to the house. It had one name on it, Zina M. For a few seconds, everything went silent. Then her mother dropped to the ground in shock. She couldn't believe it. Her father, angry and shaking, shouted at the workers to stop, but no one listened. The house was no longer theirs. It was legal. Everything had been done the right way. Neighbors gathered, whispering and watching. Some felt sorry. Others remembered how Zina had once been treated and said nothing. The same girl they once ignored had just taken back everything without saying a word. But Zina wasn't there. She didn't come to see their reaction. She didn't need to. At that very moment, she was sitting in a modern office in the city, dressed in a simple outfit, signing her third business contract with a major tech company. Her focus was on the future, on building more, on growing higher. She didn't need to stand at the gate and say, "I told you so." She didn't need revenge speeches or loud fights. Her actions spoke for her. The truck, the locks, the paper, they said everything. She had taken control of the very place where she was once treated like she didn't matter. The girl they once told, "You'll figure it out," had figured it all out and more. She had gone from cleaning offices to owning property, from walking 4 hours in tears to driving her own change in silence. And the best part, she didn't push anyone down to rise. She just rose. This time, she wasn't asking to be seen. She had made herself impossible to ignore. After everything that had happened, Zina finally got a knock on her door. It wasn't a surprise. She had expected it. Sooner or later, standing outside, were her parents. They had traveled all the way to the city just to see her. This time, they didn't come with pride or anger. They came without obesity. They came in quiet clothes, both of them wearing white, as if trying to show they were sorry, that they had changed. Their faces looked tired. Their voices were soft. Zina let them in, not with hate in her heart, but with calmness. She didn't plan a dramatic moment. She didn't speak with bitterness. Instead, she went into the kitchen and made tea. She placed the cups gently on the table and sat down across from them. There was silence for a while. until her father finally spoke. He said they had made mistakes, that they were just trying their best as parents. Her mother added, "We were under pressure. Your brother was our hope." Zina listened, every word. She didn't interrupt. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. When they finished, she took a slow sip of her tea, looked at them, and gave a small smile. "That's the difference," she said gently. "I made myself hope." He waited to be handed it. Her words were simple, but they hit deep. She didn't need to explain further. They knew what she meant. Zina had built herself from nothing. She had walked in silence, worked in silence, and risen in silence. She had no one backing her, no one clapping for her, no one choosing her. She chose herself. And now, the very people who once ignored her were sitting in her home, drinking her tea, hoping she would let them back into her life. But she didn't throw them out. Zina wasn't cruel. She listened, and she forgave, but only in her heart. She didn't hug them, didn't promise anything. She had learned that trust is not something you give easily, especially when it has been broken too many times. That day, she didn't give them answers. She just gave them tea, a simple act, but it said everything. No more begging, no more proving, no more pain. She was no longer the girl who waited to be seen. She was the woman they now had to come and see. And not just because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. Obisi was once the golden child. Everyone in the family believed in him. He was given everything, including the car that came from Zina's stolen inheritance. For a while, he enjoyed the spotlight, but slowly, things started to fall apart. The job he was so proud of didn't last. It turned out he had been involved in some shady activities at work, and a fraud investigation got him fired. The same car he bragged about online, taken back by the company because he couldn't make the payments. His proud smile disappeared, and the praise he once received turned into silence. Meanwhile, Zina's life was growing in the opposite direction. She was running her own projects, signing new contracts, and managing her team from her city office. She wasn't making noise about it, but her success was steady and strong, the kind you can't ignore, even when it's quiet. One day, Obisi sent her a message. It was short and awkward. He didn't say sorry. He didn't ask how she was. He simply wrote, "Please help me, as your sister." Zina stared at the message for a while. Her fingers moved slowly on the keyboard. She typed just one word, "earn." Then she locked her phone and got back to work. He didn't give up. A few days later, he came to her house. But he wasn't calm. He was drunk, shouting her name, asking to talk. He stood at her gate, causing a scene. Zina didn't go out. She stood by her office window and watched as the security guards walked out and asked him to leave. At first, he argued. Then he stumbled back and walked away, slowly, head down. She didn't feel joy seeing him like that, but she didn't feel pity either. This was the same person everyone had protected, the same person she had sacrificed her dreams for. And yet, when it was her turn to need support, no one stood for her. Zina had learned something important. You don't always need to shout to show you're strong. You don't need to argue or fight back to win. Sometimes, just staying silent and distant is enough. Let people see who you've become, and let them feel the space they created when they didn't believe in you. Obisi's fall was quiet. There were no headlines, no drama, just slow, painful truth. And Zina's rise, that was even quieter, but 10 times stronger. Zina never wanted to hurt anyone. Even after everything her family had done, she didn't feel hate in her heart. She didn't scream or try to take revenge. She just wanted peace. When she bought the house, she could have thrown them out completely, but she didn't. Instead, she left them a small room at the back of the compound. It was simple, but safe. They had a roof over their heads. They had water and light. But the front door, the main house, that was hers now. It was the part of the house where she was once ignored, where she was treated like she didn't matter. And now, it was a space she walked through with pride. She made changes, not just to the building, but to the energy inside. She brought in young women from the village to work with her, girls who had been struggling looking for jobs. Some of them had once been laughed at by her own mother, who used to call them useless or lazy. Now, those same girls were wearing uniforms, holding keys, and moving with respect. Zina gave them training. She treated them with kindness. She made sure they were paid fairly and respected. And every time her mother passed them in the hallway, she saw the very girls she once mocked now working in the house she had lost control of. Zina didn't yell. She didn't explain herself. She didn't need to. The change spoke for itself. The girl they used to call background noise, the one who was always overlooked, now ran the entire house. She made the rules. She decided who stayed and who left. She chose what music played in the living room, what food was cooked, what the garden looked like. Her voice, once silenced, now set the tone for everything. And yet, she remained gentle. She didn't brag. She didn't insult them. She just lived with quiet power. Her family had locked her out emotionally for years. Now, she had turned the lock, not out of revenge, but to protect her peace, to give herself the space to grow without being pushed down again. She didn't need to hurt them to feel strong. Just creating distance was enough. That space allowed her to heal, to think clearly, and to move forward without carrying the pain of the past. Zena had finally taken control of her life, not to punish, but to protect her heart from ever being broken like that again. Months passed, and Zena's name began to travel far beyond the small town she grew up in. People started to hear about the young tech entrepreneur who had built something powerful from nothing. Her story was shared in interviews, on blogs, and in online forums. She didn't chase fame, but her work spoke so loudly, the world began to listen. One evening, she was invited to a big business gala. The hall was filled with important people, CEOs, investors, journalists, and young dreamers looking for inspiration. Zena walked in calmly, wearing a simple dress, her head high, her smile soft. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She had already done that just by being there. When her name was called for the Innovation Award, the room clapped loudly. She walked to the stage and stood in front of the microphone. She looked around, not with nerves, but with peace. Then she began to speak. "I was born in a house that taught me silence," she said. "But now, I build homes that speak love." The crowd went quiet for a moment, then clapped even louder. Some people stood. Some had tears in their eyes. Zena didn't say more. She didn't need to. Those few words told her whole story. The pain, the fight, the growth, and the healing. Far away, in a small room with a borrowed phone, her parents were watching. They weren't sitting in the front row. They weren't invited, but they had found a way to stream the event. As they watched her stand on that stage, something inside them shifted. For the first time, they truly saw her, not as the daughter who was always quiet, not as the girl they could ignore, but as a woman who had become everything they never imagined: strong, wise, respected. They didn't speak. They just stared at the screen, wondering how they missed it all, how the same girl they once left out of family decisions, who walked 4 hours in pain, who they thought would never rise, was now being clapped for by the world. Zena hadn't just reclaimed her inheritance. She had created a new path. She didn't follow the old rules. She rewrote them. She showed that you don't have to be chosen by others to win. You can choose yourself. And when you do, your voice becomes too powerful to ever be ignored again.